Now these days, you can go online and check the National Online Registry to make sure your neighbor isn't a vampire. But there's a lot of flaws in the system, so for anyone who might be worried that your neighbor is a blood-sucking child of the night, yeah, there's a few things you can look for, some helpful tips. For example, if your neighbor never comes out during daylight hours, he could be a vampire.
Or he could be Charlie Sheen. If your neighbor gets nervous whenever walking past a church, he could be a vampire.
Or he could have been an altar boy as a child. If your neighbor is extremely white and has no sense of humor, he could be a vampire.
Or he could be Jay Leno. If your neighbor insists on sleeping in a box of his native soil, he could be a vampire.
Or he could be an environmental soil runoff activist. If you see a colony of bats, and one of them is your neighbor, then we're pretty sure he's a vampire.
See,
That actually makes sense.
Some of these are not funny, they're just informative. But if you're certain your neighbor is a vampire, then you may be asking yourself, am I a vampire? Well, to help answer that question, we've invited the Movie Guy's resident observational comedian. Please welcome Jeff Fangsworthy.
Hey, if you go to comb your hair in the mirror, and the only thing you see is a comb, you might be a vampire.
One wonderful joke.
If you go to a blood bank and you make a withdrawal instead of deposit, you might be a vampire.
Two wonderful jokes.
If you order a BLT and that B stands for blood, you might be a vampire.
3 observational cuties.
If you avoid steakhouses just on general principle, you might be a vampire.
Four priceless gems.
If you get nervous just crossing your T's, you might be a vampire.
It's funny because it's true.
If the number of your SPF is higher than the current year, you might be a vampire.
Six wonderful jokes.
And if you've got a red neck, you might be ready to be a vampire.